All right, good evening and welcome to our latest episode of How Local Government Works, brought to you by Spotlight PA. I'm Christopher Baxter, the Executive Director and Editor in Chief of Spotlight PA, and I'm so glad to see you all here. Holding our public officials accountable is fundamental to our role as journalists, but it really takes all of us for that process to be effective. While we on our side can uncover waste, fraud, abuse, mismanagement, what have you, and let you know about it, only you, the public, have the ability to actually demand and drive change. And nowhere does that feel more important than right in your community on the issues that affect you most directly: clean drinking water, safe streets, peaceful communities, smooth roads, and viable bridges, and more. In short, keeping an eye on your tax dollars at work. And so tonight, we're excited to have a discussion to help more of you do what we do every day: hold those in power to account. For those of you who are new to our programming, Spotlight PA is an independent, nonpartisan, and nonprofit newsroom producing investigative and public service journalism about the state government and urgent statewide issues. We make all of our vital reporting available to the public at no cost through our website, spotlightpa.org, as well as by sharing it with 95 community newsrooms who republish our work all across this state. And we can only do that because of your support. This is truly a public service, and it takes all of us to sustain and continue. So tonight, I'm asking for your help. We need about a dozen gifts this evening for us to cover our costs and break even for this event. So that means if just 12 folks here in the audience today step forward now and make a contribution in support of this vital educational and public service programming, we can keep it up. You can do so now by going to spotlightpa.org/donate. Again, that's spotlightpa.org/donate. I see some folks here tonight who are already members, so I want to give a big shout out to them and a thank you for your generosity and support of our journalism. You make all of this possible. But I also know a bunch of folks here tonight are not yet a member, and I'm hopeful that you'll consider joining us tonight. Think of it as sort of like a suggested donation at the door. If you're benefiting from our work and you have the means to show your support and allow us to continue to offer it for free to everyone across Pennsylvania, please do so now at spotlightpa.org/donate. Your support not only allows this event, future events, and all of our journalism to continue, you also allow us to keep all of that vital information free and available to the public, not stuck behind a paywall or available only to those who can pay. So I'll ask one more time, please join us tonight with a tax-deductible gift at spotlightpa.org/donate. A few housekeeping items. We are recording tonight's event. For those who can't make it, you'll be able to review the event in the next day or so on our website. If you have a question for our panelists, please drop them in the Q&A section here on Zoom. Just click that button down on your toolbar, ask your question, and I know the panel will get to as many of those as possible. Lots of folks sent questions in advance, so same, we will try to get to as many of those as possible. And with that, I'm going to hand things off to Min Jian, who's going to lead tonight's panel. Min?
Thank you, Chris, for that introduction, and thank you for everyone for joining us this evening. It's my pleasure to introduce you to our panelists this evening. Alice Elia is a council member for the borough of Chambersburg and former president of town council. Elia served on Chambersburg's Recreation Advisory Committee and Stormwater Policy Compliance Committee. She oversaw the hiring of the borough's first diversity and employment resources coordinator, pushed for sustainability in borough utilities, and helped develop the Chambersburg Aquatic Center. Welcome, Alice.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Greg Prim is Township Manager for Allegheny Township and Westmoreland County since 2009, and soon will be City Manager for Lower Borough City, also in Westmoreland County. Prim has been recognized statewide for his civil service and has taught professional management to municipal officials across Pennsylvania. He is the immediate past president of the Association for Pennsylvania Municipal Management. Welcome, Greg.
Very much.
Neil Fogel is Senior Economic and Community Development Educator for Penn State Extension, where he teaches land use planning and local government management. His work has been recognized at the state and national levels. Prior to working at Penn State Extension, Fogel has 15 years of experience working in municipal planning in Columbia County. Welcome, Neil.
Thank you.
And I'm Min Shen, local accountability reporter of Spotlight PA's State College Regional Bureau. Local government officials in Pennsylvania, whether they're elected or appointed, have a wide range of power to shape our daily lives. They plan ahead for the growth and development of a community, and they provide many essential public services in safety and infrastructure. In January, Spotlight PA hosted a virtual panel to discuss Pennsylvania's fragmented system of local government and its effects on municipal operation and oversight. I'm delighted to continue that conversation this evening, where I'll talk with our panelists about ways to better involve residents in local government and what to do when problems arise. So I want to kick off our conversation with this question for you, Alice. State laws about open meetings and open records set a baseline for transparency and accountability in local government. But elected officials are not required to be knowledgeable about those rules. What has been your approach to being accountable?
Well, I'll say for me, transparency and accountability come down to accessibility. So as an elected official, I think it's really important that we are accessible to our community and that people can find us and that we are responsive. I have found that all too often when I, as a voter or constituent, have reached out to people who represent me, they don't always respond. And you feel like you're sending your message into a void. So I feel like it's really important as a person who does represent people in my community that I do respond and that I hear people. I think it makes us better decision makers, and it helps us serve our community better.
And do you feel like you have adequate resources, trainings, or education of sorts to help you understand your duties and responsibility as an elected official?
I do. I can only speak for myself in the borough of Chambersburg. We are very fortunate that we have an amazing staff that helps elected officials do our jobs well. We have resources to be able to attend trainings and sessions where we can network with other elected officials. I don't know that that's the case for every municipality. I know that we're all slightly differently resourced, but I feel like, at least in my municipality, we're very fortunate that we, if we want to be trained and knowledgeable on how to be better elected officials, we certainly have those resources available to us.
And the borough of Chambersburg bills itself as a municipality, providing more services than any other in Pennsylvania because it operates both its own electric and natural gas systems. So with more authority, there's an even greater responsibility in making sure that official actions are open and residents are engaged in decision-making processes. What are some policies in place in Chambersburg for that purpose?
So I think when I was thinking about this question, one of the things that we do, so we have a website that has a lot of information on it. So our meeting agendas, all of our past minutes, ways for people to contact staff and elected officials, all of that's very available. Something that we do that I think is helpful also to the public is that we have an opportunity for people to sign up for an email blast. And right now we have close to 3,000 people signed up for it. And so it's an easier way, maybe a more passive way for people to receive meeting agendas for upcoming council meetings. And one thing we've done recently is add to that email blast information about upcoming board and commission meetings so that people can better find out if something is going to affect where they live or where they work or their favorite park. They can see what's on all of those agendas so that if they're interested in attending any of those meetings, they can. I think it's hard to expect residents to constantly go to their municipality's webpage to see what's coming up because people are busy and they have their own lives and they aren't as tied around local government as maybe some of us are. So I think if anything we can do to make it easier for people to find out what's happening in their community, it's our job to do that.
I think that goes back to the point you make about accessibility.
Right.
And I want to turn to Greg for another important aspect in local government function. You are a professional municipal manager. What does a professional manager do, and why is it important that local governments have them?
Well, let me first say that municipal management in Pennsylvania is something that every local government has the ability to create through passage of an ordinance to create the position. When municipalities or municipal boards do that, they are giving or bestowing certain powers on an individual to run the municipality day to day, as opposed to most municipal boards, councils, and boards of supervisors act as a group. Like their power is as a board, not as individuals. So they can bestow powers onto one individual to be more efficient in running the local government day to day. But like to be a little bit more specific about that, I mean, essentially the manager is charged with carrying out the policies of the elected officials. So they pass the policies and the manager implements the policies. Some of the specific duties and responsibilities the manager have can vary depending on the size of municipality they're in. I have colleagues that are in much bigger municipalities than I am that really just manage people mostly and departments, where in my case, I actually am in the trenches. I actually do some of the accounting myself, and I do things myself that other municipalities have more staff to complete those tasks. But a manager is a coordinator who coordinates all the day-to-day activities in the municipality. So from that perspective, there's an administrative leadership role as the chief executive officer of the municipality. The manager provides overall leadership to the staff, to the administrative staff, and to the police department and public works staff. Budget and financial management. The manager typically is the person charged with putting the budget together and presenting that to the elected officials with explanation as to why certain allocations are being sought for the next year. I said before, policy implementation is important. That's a role of the manager. Personnel management. And what the one interesting thing about that people don't realize about municipal managers, I think, in Pennsylvania is that we kind of got to be a jack of all trades. Like we have to be an expert in human resources, an expert in municipal finance, an expert in administration and leadership. Like there's a lot of different areas that we have to pull from to run the municipality day to day. It is important, I think, for municipalities in Pennsylvania to have management, though, because I've been doing this for 35 years. When I started, this was far less technical than it is now. This has become a very technical job, meaning that it's very hard for people that are just elected into office to come in and know how to run the municipality when we have so many mandates that are on us that we have to implement, and so many laws that we have to follow. So from that perspective, a municipal manager provides all of that for his or her board so that they are in compliance with the laws of Pennsylvania.
Yeah. I want to hear Neil and Alice, if you have anything to add about professional management in municipalities, since you both have experience working with municipalities.
Yeah, I guess I can add, with our government of over 2,500 local municipalities, there's such a variety of sizes relative to population and staff and things of that nature. And certainly it seems like the more population or the more services you provide, obviously, I think there's more of a need for the professional management or professional staff. A lot of municipalities still have it. Some have very limited because they have limited population or not as many issues. In my career, I've been to a lot of municipal meetings, and it varies from a very nice large meeting room because of the size of the population to a local fire hall to a municipal secretary's kitchen. So it's just such a variety of how things are available to them, and do they have the resources to have the professional staff as well.
Mm-hmm. I would agree. And I also think in one of your previous episodes, it might have been the last one, you had a solicitor who is a solicitor for many municipalities. We rely on our solicitor a lot too, as elected officials, to keep us in line with laws. And so as Greg mentioned, also having a borough manager who knows what they're doing and having solicitors who can make sure that you're following the laws that you need to follow to keep your municipality in line is really important. Our municipality, because as you mentioned, we have our utilities, we have a very large budget too, and there are a lot of laws and rules to follow around utilities too. So it would be very hard for someone walking in who doesn't have any prior experience in that to know what they need to do. So it's important to have people who know those things, who can help keep elected officials doing what they need to do and moving forward, but doing it in a way that works.
So Greg, talk to us about your path in becoming a credentialed professional municipal manager. Are there any kind of uniform requirements when it comes to training or continuing education for municipal managers in Pennsylvania right now?
That's kind of the crazy thing about local government in Pennsylvania. Elected council people, supervisors, if you're at a borough council or city council, they really, by code, have the ability to hire anybody they want to be their manager. There's no educational requirement for that position by the codes. And therein, I think, lies a big part of the problem. I mean, I think that when you could just hire anybody, I mean, literally, man, you could hire an 18-year-old high school dropout, your manager, if you wanted to. Now, I know that's going to an extreme, but that can't happen in Pennsylvania. So I guess from my perspective, I'm happy to tell you my path, which is kind of funny, because I graduated from college in 1989. In 1990, I was hired by the borough of Falls Creek to be their first borough manager ever. And one of the things the elected officials, and this, I'm making a point with this, one thing the elected officials said to me was, do you know accounting? And I said, I've never had an accounting class in my life. I was graduating with a bachelor's degree and never had an accounting class. And they're like, oh, we'll have somebody here to show you. And they hired me. I started on a Tuesday and I had to have my first payroll out on a Friday. And there was nobody there to show me anything. I had a stepfather that was a controller for a paving company. The next 3 nights gave me crash course accounting. And I had my first payroll out on Friday. Now, the irony with that is that now I teach the basic bookkeeping class for the Commonwealth, the DCB, but that was 36 years ago, and I was a scared kid. But I think the point I'm trying to make is that borough council hired me. They made a decision to hire me with zero financial experience. They were lucky. I took that job seriously, and I really engrossed myself in learning this job, which is, I think, part of what my success has been about in this field. But the reality is that can happen anywhere, that they can hire people that don't have the background and experience. And I left there after 1.5 years. I went to Penn Township in Butler County for the next 18 years. The very first year I was at Penn Township in Butler County, my predecessor, who I was replacing, about 2 weeks into my job, it was pretty obvious that he had stolen money. And I was 23 years old, and I was now having to go to my board and say, the 65-year-old I just replaced has been stealing your money. So that ended up in a 1.5 year investigation, and it turned into a $140,000 theft that nobody knew any money was ever missing. But I think I've been very lucky that I've had these experiences that have taught me so much about what not to do. And I've been in the right place in the right time. I think the success of any municipal manager is being able to utilize your colleagues and resources and picking up the phone and calling other managers and learning from them. But it goes back to the fact that there is no required training to be a manager. Like you either, in my opinion, you either have it as a total love of your life and you do it, because you really love civic duty. And then there's the alternative is you're not going to succeed if you don't. So some of the places that do have problems either don't have good professional municipal managers, or they don't have the ability to understand what the job is really about, if that makes sense. I know a lot of wonderful managers, like, Alice has a wonderful manager in Chambersburg. Jeff is great. And I know a number of very, very good people in this field. But I do know that there are places that have problems that they just can't recognize what they need to make sure their municipality is running the most efficiently.
I think that's a somewhat unfortunate but still very impactful aspect about municipalities that we should think about. And I would love to come back to it hopefully a little more later. Neil, I want to turn to you now. Your previous career as a county land use planner, as well as your current position as a Penn State Extension educator, revolve around professional knowledge in local government decision making. So talk to us about how well you think Pennsylvania municipalities do in terms of incorporating research, training, best practices into their day-to-day operations and policies.
Yeah, I think with just like with anything, I mean, there's a variety. Some municipalities really, I think, keep up with the latest trends and whatnot. Others, for a number of reasons, which maybe I can address in a minute, just don't have as much opportunity. But there are, and this is mentioned earlier, as far as the training available, there is a good bit of training available out there for municipal officials and staff as well. For instance, you mentioned research. That's what universities do, and we do research at Penn State. So we do research-based training and other trainings as far as whether it's specific to land use issues, whether it's grant writing. I mean, we've done training relative to those issues. We've done work with public engagement. What are some tools or techniques that may be effective, and when are they best used? We have some videos on role of a citizen planner. So not only elected officials, but if somebody from the public wants to find out about that, that's available as well. I'll mention too, it's really interesting to me. One of the highly attended webinars that we did was relative to changing landscape practices, where a lot of people now want to let their yards grow for bee pollination and things of that nature, which can be a great thing, but the neighbors may not think it's a great thing. So we had a very high turnout for what's the purpose for this? What are some ways as far as, what are municipalities doing as far as the regulatory side of things? And, what's the good and bad? So that's an example. I think also was mentioned a lot of the training and more recent techniques, like there's different associations for municipal officials. There's Pennsylvania State Association of Townships. There's a state association for boroughs and cities as well. I think Pennsylvania DCED, Department of Community and Economic Development, also does training. They also have, Extension does a lot of articles and whatnot you can find on our website, but DCED has a lot as well, particularly for local government. What the various positions do, or what's the roles that are out there. So that's available as well. As far as a variation in some, I think there's a lot of reasons. Again, the limited budget in some municipalities, limited staff, limited time. A lot of times too, it takes a local champion on a particular issue to really bring it forward. If somebody either at the elected or appointed level, or somebody that's concerned as far as a resident, can kind of bring something to the forefront as well. I think the other thing that happens a lot of times is, I mean, local municipalities can use consultants or professionals that they hire for particular projects, whether it's writing a land use ordinance, whether it's reviewing a development plan, all types of things. So a lot of times I think they rely on that professional to have some of that, knowing the most up-to-date techniques as well. So I think it's a combination. Yes, it's great for them to know it, and they should to their degree, but there's some reliance on others as well for that.
I'm glad you mentioned DCED, the Pennsylvania Department of Community and Economic Development is the state agency that manages a lot of local government issues, and I utilize their resources a lot. They publish a lot of statistics that are publicly available. Their library is a great source of information, so I would encourage our audience to check that out if they want to find out information about local government in general or look into something pertinent to their own municipalities. And Neil, I have read a publication that you co-author, which taught citizens about what kind of questions to ask regarding natural gas development in their communities. And I loved reading it because I sometimes find it very difficult to have a starting place when I try to understand a complex public issues like that. Can you share some ideas or tips for residents in general about approaching an unfamiliar or really complicated public affairs topic?
Sure. First, I guess I'd say to the most degree that you can, please be proactive. I often say a lot of the planning that's done is more reaction versus planning. So not only from a municipal level as a resident or somebody that has a stake in the community, keep up to date on what's going on or attend meetings. The municipal website was mentioned. Look that over. What information, just spend some time in it. It's going to be worth your the education that you get by seeing what's going on. Also, like I mentioned, a lot of the trainings or information relative to whether it's land use or just local municipal government is available that residents can look as well. So find out about that. Have a dialogue with others, whether it's elected officials, whether it's your neighbors, friends, family. Communication is really important. Find out what they think about something. It's interesting that I do some youth education, and I do an activity where we do a local government class or day-long class, and I have them think about what do you think are the top 5 most important parts of the community, and from their perspective, and then I'll say, okay, now the next step is now you represent senior citizens. Now this group, instead of yourself, you represent young families, or you represent economic development officials, or you now are environmental groups for the others. It makes them think about, what, there are other opinions, or these issues affect more than just one side of it. So look at all sides. Yeah, you will have you certainly will have an opinion, and that's your right to have it, but at least be receptive to see what other people think or feel, and then make up your mind. When you make up your mind, be respectful with your opinion. There are others' opinions out there. And the other thing I think I'd like to mention is, we're talking about accountability, and I think we have to think about what does that really mean, because it doesn't necessarily mean elected officials are accountable to agree with you at all times to make the decisions you want. So the accountability is certainly to be a fair process, to hear what all the opinions are, to look at what is best for the community. But it's, none of us ever get all the decisions we want all the time, and we have to understand that.
I'm also curious to hear from Greg and Alice about this. What is your experience, or what are some suggestions that you would have for residents when they come to you with wanting to understand some complex issue in local governments?
Okay, I'll start. I think Well, first of all, as an elected official, it's my job to listen and try to understand and hear what their concerns are and what their questions are. And then we are fortunate to have a very gifted staff. So being an elected official, I think even though this information is accessible to all of the residents and constituents in Chambersburg, I have a slightly insider view of maybe who to contact. And so I can help get the person to the right place. And I know this is the case here, and I think you hope that in all municipalities, your staff are competent and willing and able to answer questions that the community has. So, I mean, land use issues are very complicated, and we are fortunate that we have a department that answers people's questions 6 days a week and is available to help. And so I think knowing where to direct people, my advice to voters and community members is to just ask. So if you have a question and you don't know it, there's no shame in asking, because often even your elected official is going to have to ask somebody as well. And so I think just knowing that we're all people, and ultimately our goal is to have the best communities that we can, and we're all working toward that goal, trying to have an ally, or at least somebody who can help you figure out the best way to navigate the system is important. I completely agree with Neil. We don't all agree on everything, and we are all apt to have our own bubble of information and the people that we know best. And I think it's really important, I think especially for the people who are making the decisions, to remember that they represent the whole community and not just their next door neighbors. And so remembering even that people who can't come to meetings or don't have access or don't have the time to reach out are still people who we're representing. So we want to think about everybody when we're making decisions.
I'll add to what Neil said too, in that there is a lot of training out there available for municipal officials if they elect to take the time to do it. They're not required to do it, and therein probably lies some of the problem as well. The DCD, to the Governor's Center for Local Government Services, has a group of classes they call their core training classes. Right now, the Pennsylvania Municipal League holds the contract to put out the training for the core training classes, which is basic bookkeeping, elected auditors, land use and zoning classes, and they do these year round. Problem is, I've been teaching these classes for the DCD for the last 20 years, and the problem is, since the pandemic, those classes used to be done in person, but since the pandemic, we can't get anybody back in person, so they're doing a lot of them via Zoom meeting. But the training is still being provided. You talked to me about the library that DCD has. It's an impressive library. If you go to the DCD publications, I mean, there is actually one of the guides that they produce is called the Citizen's Guide to PA Local Government, like where people can download that for free and look at how local government works, if people want to take time to do that. And I think that comes down to a lot of this, is people taking the time to want to know how to do their jobs better. In Pennsylvania, most municipal elected official organizations, like supervisors and borough councils, they get paid very little to do those jobs. So they're almost volunteer. So although they do take the jobs and they run for the jobs, they also have a full-time job on top of that. So that's another reason why having a professional manager is really important, because people only have so much time in a day. It's been my experience with the boards that I've worked with that most boards I've worked with have always wanted to be as transparent as they can possibly be. Now you have those occasionally who veer off that path, but most of the people I've worked with, they want to be accountable to the public. So as a staff, when we're responding to the public, we also want to show that transparency in our responses. I do want to educate residents when they call in. I want to answer their questions. And I saw like one of the questions like that popped up on the side was about planning and zoning. Well, the municipality's planning code in the state of Pennsylvania is the governing document. That's the Bible for municipal planning in Pennsylvania. You can download that for free from the DCD website. So even if you don't know anything about zoning at all, if you read the MPC and look through the MPC and use it as your guide, you're going to learn a lot. So sometimes people just need to be accountable for themselves. They need to take the bull by the horns, and if they want to learn it, there's plenty of resources out there that will help them learn all the aspects of local government if they take the time to do it.
And Greg, I know you and other professional municipal managers care really deeply about upholding a code of conduct or a code of ethics. And you talk about best practices in your daily work a lot, especially because there are no requirements for those best practices. So talk to us about some of the key points, both from your code of conduct and best practices that you would like our audience to know about in local governments.
So the Association for Pennsylvania Municipal Management is a state chapter affiliate of the International City County Managers Association out of Washington, D.C. And those of us that belong to that organization must subscribe to a code or an ethics code, tenant code. There's 12 tenets that we must agree to follow if we're going to be in that organization. And it all has to do with accountability. And and one thing that makes managers successful is that they're not elected; they're appointed. So they're not being tugged with political pressures. The idea about having a manager there is so that you can have consistent planning and consistent abilities to do the job where politics don't come into play. The way our managers association is developed, we're supposed to hold each other accountable to those tenets as well. And it's probably one of the strictest ethics codes that I've seen in my career that we follow. But the question is this, I guess part of the problem is this: if you don't belong to our association and you don't belong to the International City County Managers Association, then you don't follow these tenants. So if there's been situations throughout the state where there's managers that other managers don't even know because they don't come to the training that we take through our association membership. So we do take our job very seriously, and we do take our responsibility and role very, very seriously. And I can tell you that those managers that are credentialed and that are members of ICMA are following a code of tenets. And some people might ask, well, what if you don't follow the code of tenets? What happens? Well, a lot can happen to us. Under ICMA's rules, if we violate a code of tenet, we can get censured. And when we get censured, that goes on our record with ICMA, and any future employer that may be looking to do a background check on us can check with ICMA, and ICMA would say this manager was censored back in like 4 years ago. And so we do take our jobs very seriously, and we want to do the best job we can for the residents of the municipality. And it does become personal with us that we we really want to display what good professional management can bring to a municipality.
In Pennsylvania, there are built-in mechanisms for transparency and public input in land use decision-making processes, but the process often remains an opaque part of local government. And that parallels many other aspects in local government too. I'm thinking about budgeting, getting grants, spending the grants, and much more. I want to hear from all of our panelists. Where do you see the gaps between those mechanisms that is supposed to ensure transparency and public input, and where does it fall short? What can be done to close them? Neil, would you like to go first?
Sure. The one thing that I think of for this is relative to like public engagement. There's a lot of requirements for a public meeting, or before you do a certain thing, you have to have a public meeting. And Unfortunately, sometimes it's just looked at, I need to check that box. Okay, I had my public meeting, we're done. So it needs to be looked at more so, and what's the purpose of this engagement? Is it just to say, here's what we're going to do, and now we're going to move on, and we've checked the box? Or is it more of a, yeah, to inform, but to actually seek the input? Or is there a role for people in the community to play in the decision making? Is there going to be some type of committee formed, or how is that input going to be used for that decision or that actual engagement? And in reality, really good engagement doesn't just stop when that particular issue is over. It will continue between people in the community and the officials as well. So I think related to that, particularly for controversial issues, we need to think about, okay, at what stage is this occurring, and when really should we have this engagement? Because if you're so far in the conflict cycle that both sides are basically dug in, it's very, very hard to get to the point of discussion. How can we best get through this? So the earlier the better, and getting the key stakeholders involved in that process to come to hopefully a good decision, the best decision for the community. The other thing I guess I'll just quickly say is from a resident's perspective, there are a lot of opportunities to play a role in your local community at the government level. It doesn't have to be an elected official, and I think it was mentioned already. There's lots of committees. It could be just a committee to look at an issue. It could be a planning board. It could be relative to an environmental advisory committee. And the list can go on and on. So just because you aren't elected, don't think that there's no role for you, because there's certainly a role just as a resident to let your opinion be known. But there's also other avenues you can serve and can help.
Yeah, exactly. There are a lot of advisory committees. And I know in our community, our residents can go on our website and there's a way for them to say what they're interested in. And so, I mean, there are committees about shade trees and there are committees about planning and zoning. And so people can look and see what's available and what they're interested in. And that is definitely a way to be involved in an issue that you care about. And people can start off by attending meetings and seeing what they might be interested in. I think I saw in the comments, somebody had mentioned something about local newspapers. And I do think in talking about transparency and getting information out, I know that there are many communities, mine included, that struggle to, we have lost our local paper. It's turned into a regional paper. There's not very much local reporting. I think at some point there were reporters at all of the council meetings. So people were reading the paper and seeing what was happening, and that doesn't happen anymore. And so that's something that's definitely been lost. And I think that adds to lack of information about what's happening in your local government. And that's unfortunate. I'm kind of the school of thought that I want to make it easier for people to find out what's happening and not necessarily put the onus on them to search it out. And so I think anything we can do to make that possible, we have the responsibility to do. As far as participation in meetings too, and this is something that my community has done and then changed. So during COVID, we had to, like everybody else, figure out ways to allow people to be involved without packing a room. And not that our room is often packed for council meetings, but how do we allow people to engage in a way that was safe? And so we made it available to participate via Zoom. And people who were watching the meetings via Zoom could also fully participate. They could ask questions, they could comment in public comment. and I felt it was a really important way to allow people to participate. Our meetings are at 7 p.m. on a Monday night. It allowed parents who are putting their kids to bed to participate in local government and decisions that are being made. It provided an outlet for people. That council made a decision later to change that and make it so that the Zoom option is only available for watching and people cannot participate. I personally felt like that was an unfortunate decision because it took away the ability to have input in that real-time way. And I think, you know, it's obviously things of that nature are a decision of the whole council, but I personally feel like we can make better decisions with a more active public. And so anything that an elected body can do to hear from more people and to make better informed decisions is a positive thing.
I truly believe that there is a lot of power when residents show up to speak at a meeting. Over my years of doing this, I've had people submit comments for the board to get a response back. And I've seen people come to the board meeting itself, public meeting, and ask questions and get a much better response than they would ever get from writing their question down. So I think there's a lot of power in your ability to come to a public meeting and speak at a public meeting. Generally, elected officials want to make their public happy. And you know, even if they have to say no at times, the fact is that they will probably pay more attention to what your problem is or what your question is if you show up at a public meeting and state that on the public record. I agree with Neil when it comes to the check the box of the resolution we have to pass for the public participation part of applying for grants. I do believe a lot of times that is treated more as a checkbox than an engagement. I'm a very big fan of strategic planning and comprehensive planning because those processes absolutely invite the public in for lots of public comment. And those documents, once they're finished, become a very important document for our planning purposes for the next 10 years. So, or the next 5 to 10 years. So it's really important that, you know, if people can sit back and say, my local government doesn't listen to me, but they've got to participate. Even if they want to be on a board and they don't get on that board, they still need to go to meetings. They still need to let their voice be heard. And I will say that my experience is if you show up at the meeting and you say what you have to say, you're going to have a better response than sitting back and complaining about it.
Well, I want to open up our conversation to answer some of the questions from our audience. And this one comes from the chat. Kathy asks, are there state laws that require audits of local government books? I think, Greg, you probably know this pretty well.
Yeah, I mean, we are audited and audited and re-audited. We are audited on so many topics. So just for example, you know, any money that we get from the state for like state aid for our pension plans or liquid fuels money, those are not only just audited by our EPAs, they're also audited by state auditors that come in and give them a double audit. So yes, they're all audited. We are required to have an annual audit. We have to submit an annual financial report to DC by March 30th of every year. So yes, their audits are required by all codes, and they have to be completed in order and submitted in order to make sure that you're getting other funding that you are entitled to throughout the year. So essentially, you know, the quick and easy answer to that is we are very audited. Now, I will want to point out that in some local governments, they have elected auditors. God bless the elected auditors, but please keep in mind that the elected auditors, again, have no requirement or any kind of credentialed background to become auditors. So again, you could be an 18-year-old high school dropout and become an elected auditor in your municipality. One of the classes I teach for DCD is the basic training for elected auditors. And I've sat through many of those classes, and boards of auditors will come, and even some boards of auditors that have been doing it for 3 or 4 years, when they're done with my class, they'll be like shaking their head like, we've never done this, we've never done this, we've never done this. If you want to get down to brass tacks, the elected auditor's role or job is actually harder than the CPA's role, because in the elected auditor world, the code requires auditors to look at every single transaction in the municipality for the year, whereas CPA under general accounting principles can do random sampling. Essentially, there's much more responsibility for the elected auditors, which is why that audit takes, by code, longer to do in order to make sure you are seeing every transaction. And it's not just a numbers audit, it's a procedural audit as well, where you are not just making sure that the math is correct, but you're also making sure that things were done procedurally correctly, like how items were bid out. Was it put out for public bid? Were they awarded in a public setting? Was the bid bonds collected for that particular item that you bid out? Was there a performance bond collected after the contract was awarded? All of those things are things that the elected auditors and the auditors must check as part of the procedural part of running the municipality. So it's not just a numbers, it's not just a matter of adding up numbers, it's a matter of making sure the process went correctly. That also being said, though, I also believe that an auditor's job isn't to look for theft. An auditor's job is to look to make sure things were done correctly. If they find theft as part of that, that's great, but that isn't their primary role. Their primary role is to make sure that revenues and expense were all accounted for correctly, and that the processes used in running your books for that year were done correctly as well.
There are 3 audience questions that I'm hoping that we can bundle together, and bear with me. So Isabel asked in the chat, there used to be a newspaper reporter at every commissioner or council meetings. Any suggestion for getting this local coverage back? What is working for people out there? And Arthur also asked us by submission before our event that he was a township supervisor, and it's very disappointing to see only 2 or 3 residents regularly attend their meetings. How can municipal officials encourage more residents to attend the meetings? And then the last question that I want to put both of these questions together. Johnny asks, what benefits are there when government is being held accountable? And I'll say that I bundle these questions together because I think one of the key motivators perhaps in encouraging more residents to participate, to go to public meetings, which we talked about, it could be really, really beneficial, is that we should perhaps help them see that there are benefits, there are immense values in watching their local government. So I want to throw that question to you all. What other things do you think could be done to encourage this participation more?
I personally think that, I'm seeing more and more nowadays where people where municipalities are starting a YouTube channel or starting a, like providing a Zoom link to come into their live meetings. I'm seeing that more and more. Interestingly enough, if any municipality receives cable franchise fee, part of that contract with the cable company provides money in their contract for the local government to have local access TV, to their meetings if they so choose to do that. So, I mean, I know in our particular case, we encourage people to come to the meetings all the time. We do it through our newsletter, through our website, through our Facebook page. But unfortunately, again, we still might get 3 and 4 people at the meetings. I think that every individual citizen has a responsibility to understand what's going on in their local government. And I don't know necessarily if I agree that it's up to us to market them to come to our meetings. They should want to come to our meetings because we are using their money to provide public services. And I know I'm probably in the minority there, but in my career in 35 years, I've done so many things to get people to public meetings. But at the end of the day, everybody's responsible to come to the public meeting and understand what's going on in their local government. They need to own that responsibility. It's part of their duty as a citizen.
Alice, any thoughts?
Yeah, I think so I don't know, anybody who's attended one of these meetings knows that they aren't all fun and games, and it's not totally exciting for the hours that they last. But there are so many important decisions made. I think if people understood that, and I don't know, I know I didn't before I was actively involved. I think understanding what decisions are made and how that affects your community is really important. But I also think that if the public felt like they could make a difference if they attended, they might be more willing to attend. So I do think that sometimes people attend and speak up, particularly if there's a hot button issue and maybe they don't feel heard. And so that's not going to make them come back again. I think that's really unfortunate. And sometimes people don't feel heard just because the decision that's made isn't the decision they agree with. But I do think it is important to try as hard as you can to be engaged. I think it's important for elected officials to try to reach out to their constituents if there is something that is going to directly affect them or might directly affect them. And I just think it's important. I don't know, I have found myself telling people in the community about some of the decisions that we make that they have no idea that we make those decisions. So things like, your noise ordinance changes and people aren't really aware of that, but it does affect them. And so I think, and I don't know how we have a more educated populace on basic civics, but the decisions that are made at the local level are really important, and they're made by your neighbors. And so getting to know the people who represent you and making sure that you vote. Voter turnout is very low, especially for local elections. So the people sitting up there making decisions that affect you are not necessarily elected by a majority of people in the community. And so I think making sure that you are represented by a person who you think can fairly represent you is really important. And so I think just a basic understanding of what decisions are made, and as an elected official, I think it's important for me that my constituents feel heard, because I think that is something that will make people, it would make me speak out more if I felt like the person representing me was actually listening to me and could hear my concerns.
Yeah. Neil, anything to add?
Yeah, I agree. That's a great point as far as that they make a difference. I would say if somebody says, or if they're asked to go to a public meeting, if somebody says why, how do you answer that? How do you let them know there is a reason? I will say one of my frustrations in my previous position as a county planner was when we would do comprehensive plans and have public meetings, very rarely you get more than a couple of people there. But I can tell you, if there was a development proposed that people thought it would harm their community, all the seats were taken. So I mean, I'm not saying that in a negative way, other than it's the earlier you get involved, you want to avoid problems instead of react to the problem. So just getting that out, that people understand this is going to make a difference. Or just, to me, I think people are very visual, and you can say to them, we have a meeting about XYZ, and they're going to say, yeah, so what? But if it's going to show that you live here, and here's what can happen to you. If you look at our future plan or at the zoning, and it says this can go there, and and it's realized that may spur some of that on. And I think also just maybe to get our youth involved, that's really difficult in cases, but people really think more about the future when you think, it's just not me, it's our future generation. So what do we do to keep them here? What do we do to make it that they have opportunities as well? So that's getting to look at that, community as a whole type of issue. So it's a really difficult one, but a lot of times it depends on a local community issue.
I hope
I,
your
I do
collective.
add
Yeah,
one
go
thing,
ahead.
Min. In case like the listeners here tonight don't realize this, that the law has changed that now requires us to post our agendas 24 hours before the meeting. A lot of people have meetings on Mondays, which oftentimes means the agenda is going to be posted on the website by Friday. So that's another opportunity for them to get on and look at what is going to be voted on at that meeting, and gives them foreshadowing to attend the meeting. If they get online, and it's simple, just get on the municipality's webpage, look at the agenda, and see what subjects they're going to be addressing at that meeting. And it's another way to generate interest for people to come to the meeting.
Yeah. I have a question from Joseph, who said their second-class township terminated a contract that would have sold the township's sewer system. The Board of Supervisors decided that the legal fee incurred for this unsuccessful sale would come out of the sewer fund instead of the general fund. Only half of the township's resident uses the public sewer system, and some feel that the supervisors were wrong in using the sewer fund for litigation costs. Residents were told the only recourse for that decision is to sue in court. It's probably difficult for our panelists to suggest specific actions without all the details, but I do want to hear, what do you make of this decision? Because I have seen in my reporting experience that oftentimes residents feel like they have nowhere to turn if they disagree with a decision that was made by their local elected officials, short of actually suing in court.
Well, I can tell you that there are different various types of funds in the community. So we primarily work as a municipality out of our general fund, but then they have special revenue funds, and they have business enterprise funds. Business enterprise funds would be like the sewer fund or a water fund, where the revenue is generated by the users of the system. And this particular question that you asked is that only half the municipality uses the public sewer system. So whoever asked the question felt like they should have bared the legal bills for that decision making. From my perspective, these special revenue funds exist for the use of that specific need. Like for sewer funds, you can only use that for sewer purposes. For fire tax fund, you can only use that for fire purposes. So in this particular case, where the crossover is that if the sewer fund, the one part piece we don't know is if the sewer fund was municipality owned or whether it was authority owned. But either way, if they were dealing with sewer issue, I could see why they paid for the legal funds out of the sewer fund, because they were dealing with that specific issue, and that's why that fund exists, to discuss that specific issue. Now, had that sale went through, what ends up happening is that if there's a municipal authority, it's dissolved and that money comes back to the entire community at that point. But they voted no after they did their analysis. So I could see why they paid the sewer fee or the sewer legal bill out of the sewer fund based on the information you just gave.
Yeah, and I want to ask Alice and Neil just this more generally, the question about if residents feel like they disagree or that their local government made an error in certain decisions, short of suing in court. What are the recourse? What are some options that could at least have a conversation for residents with their local government?
Well, I would say council can change any decision they make, and no council can bind a future council to anything. So if a decision is made that you aren't happy with, then reach out and you can talk to your council members. I think it's important to continue to talk, and just because something didn't go the way you felt like it should, you continue to talk. And also, council is going to turn over. So there are elections, and elections have consequences. And so run for office. I've seen some of the stuff in the chat. There are a lot of unopposed seats in local offices. People are not really interested in running for these positions. They, as was mentioned, they are paid, but not well. It's a lot of work, but it's really important work. And so I think even, if you serve for one term and it's 4 years, and you are able to at least even better understand your local government and understand how and why things get done in your community, it's really important. I know I'm not running again, and I worked really hard to try to recruit people to run, and it's very difficult to find somebody who's interested in that. But it's so important, and it is a position that you can get elected to. You can meet the people who are going to vote for you and talk to them, and you have a real impact in your community, in the place where, in my case, I was raising my children, and a place that I care about and that I want to give back to. And so it's a nice way to do that.
Yeah, the only thing I'll add is I think this is, I mean, I can't respond to a specific question, but to me, it reminds me of the importance of a lot of the appointed offices or work in a local municipality, because local elected officials do rely, or at least get input from, other boards or organizations that they appoint. So a lot of times it's not thought about the importance of those, and those are hard to fill a lot of times too. But they are extremely important as well, in their input, the perspective they give the local officials, and sometimes maybe which direction they go. So when we're talking about having discussions, absolutely, with the elected officials, but also some of the other advisory agencies that provide input to them as well. Maybe you get another, maybe it's somebody that's more sympathetic to your side of it, or that's willing to listen more and might go up the chain then.
I have a question submitted by Terry, who asks, how can taxpayers have a say in how public dollars are spent? And how can citizens get a detailed list of actual expenditures from those monies? And I think this question, I'm eager to hear from all of our panelists about.
I personally would suggest you just file a right to know request. File a right to know request. You need to be specific in what you're looking for and ask for expense reports. I see that done around here all the time. I mean, the municipalities around me and myself, our municipality included. And if you don't feel like you're getting a good response from your right to know request, then you appeal it to the Office of Open Records, and they will make a adjudication on whether they need to provide the records or not. But I think that's a pretty simple answer to me. Just file a right to know request. You should be able to get that information pretty easily.
I'll also add, so our full budget is on our webpage. There's a summary document. If somebody had a specific question about a certain expenditure, for sure, they could file a right to know request. I don't know what it's like in every municipality, so I won't assume, but our budget process is very transparent, and it's gonna start up pretty soon. And what happens in Chambersburg is that we have every department head come in and give a presentation, and it is it's time consuming, but it's really important, and it's a way for people to see what's going on in the community, what kind of decisions are made, what's coming up in each department. and how they are asking council to allocate money. And so it's important because you can find out at those meetings what your police department is asking for, and then you can find out if your council members are going to spend money there or if they're not, and you can have a say in that. If your recreation department wants to spend a lot of money somewhere, that's going to come up at budget time when they're going to come ask for it. And so I would say look at the agendas now, and you can see who's going to be giving a presentation and who's going to be asking for what. And you can be a part of that decision-making process, because that gives you an opportunity to speak up and to contact your council members. And you can speak up at the meeting, or if you're not comfortable, you can email and you can ask questions. And it's a great opportunity at those meetings to ask the department head why and what they plan to do. So I would say, budgeting starts soon, and it's going to go through early December, and then the budget will be presented. And once the budget is presented by the borough or township manager, or city manager, that gives the public an opportunity too, because there's a requirement that it's published so that people can look at it. I would say take the opportunity to look at it so that you can see what's going on and ask those questions.
Yeah, the only thing I'll add is be aware in any type of decision in local government, or time limitations for when things have to be done. So you think, oh, maybe I'll go next month, or I'll do it at a later time. It may not be possible, or it may be too late. So certainly, yeah, how you vote has a big determination on how money are spent or what the priorities are. So be educated in your vote. Certainly go to meetings and realize what some of the processes are, and again, be aware of timeframes.
And I will add that in my reporting experience, I know that a lot of the funding coming from state and national level that goes to local governments come with reporting requirements. So a lot of times you can check out the details about grants, funding, and see what are required of municipalities to report in terms of how they're spending those other layers of tax money. Absolutely, most of these information, I would assume that the Right to Know law of Pennsylvania grants public access to them. So absolutely, you can take Alice's suggestion of just simply asking specific departments, or just go to your local elected officials and ask for that kind of information, or you can absolutely file a right to know request and get those open information. And if you go on to spotlightpa.org, we have done a lot of work in terms of providing guides in terms of how do you start with an open records request if you have never done one before. And I want to ask this question from Charles A., who says that Pennsylvania mandates municipalities what services they are to deliver to their residents, but the cost of doing so for different local governments of varying sizes is uneven and sometimes proven out of reach for some. Wouldn't it be better to harmonize the population size and tax base of those political subdivisions with the services that they are mandated to deliver? I know it's a complicated and sometimes existential question in local government.
I don't know that I would agree that the codes mandate them. I think the codes allow us to provide them. Because I know many municipalities who the code permits us, to have a recreation program, for example, but it doesn't, it doesn't state how much money we have to spend on that, or some communities can elect not to have a recreation program because they can't afford it. But the code permits us to do that. So I guess there's like a little syntax there with whether I feel like it's mandated or not mandated, as much as the code permits us to provide that service if we elect to provide it. There are municipalities that have streetlights. There are municipalities that don't, but all the codes provide wording that allows you to provide streetlights for your residents, but doesn't necessarily mandate you provide streetlights for your residents. I do think that all of that is going to be based on your tax base, what you can afford to do. And there is a very big inequity throughout the Commonwealth in the size of municipality as to what they can afford to provide the services.
Any other thoughts to add, Neil or Alice?
Not as an educator, not a policymaker, so. No.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank you to all of our panelists and thank you for all the residents, audience members for joining us this evening. This is all the time that we have for our panel. For more information on how to hold your local officials accountable, you can follow Spotlight PA's How Local Government Works series. You can find that on our website, spotlightpa.org. You can find my contact information on our website as well. I welcome you to send me any more questions, especially the ones that we couldn't get to during our discussion this evening. You can also find out more about our events at spotlightpa.org/topics/events. If you have questions or comments, you can send an email to our events@spotlightpa.org. Thank you again for everyone for spending your time with us this evening. Have a good night.